Hi there, this is Katie Scapes, your friendly neighborhood escapist, and I'm going to talk a little bit about JRPG games today. A new trailer was just released for the game Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, the reboot/remake of the 2010 game Radiant Historia. The game will be released in Japan in June, and while there isn't any news for a Western release yet, I'm hopeful that we'll see a localization in the not-too-distant future. I was actually surprised to see a game that's not really that old be released and rebooted. Radiant Historia was released in Japan in 2010 and North America in 2011 for the Game Boy DS system. I really enjoyed the original game's unique turn-based battle system. The use of positions allowed for an in-depth strategy that kept battles from getting dull and repetitive. The use of different timelines kept the story interesting, and overall the story and characters were engaging enough to keep interest until the end. Overall, it was a solid handheld JRPG. The trailer for Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology has promised updated graphics, character art, an additional story, and at least one new character. Now the new game looks great, but it does make me wonder, why the remake after just one system? I think this is because Radiant Historia was released so late into the Game Boy DS's lifespan that it was overshadowed by the 3DS that was released roughly around the same time. I didn't even end up picking up the game until much later, and I played it on my 3DS. I also think that with the expansive storytelling, the game was limited in its static character avatar art, reminiscent of much older console games. So I'm excited to see more dynamic character avatars and voice acting because I think it will really enhance the storytelling. I also hope they took the opportunity to flesh out the relationships between characters. For example, in the original game, it was very clear how some characters, like Ott, related to the main character Stoke, and their interactions throughout the game made sense and added to the story. On the other hand, characters like Rainey's development was often put on the back burner, only to awkwardly be thrown into a sudden love interest twist toward the end without any real build-up. With added story elements promised in Perfect Chronology, hopefully these non-development and story awkwardness will be smoothed out in a more successful narrative. It's great to see a good game get a well-deserved reboot, but this made me think of some other JRPGs that could use a facelift. So here are 5 other JRPGs that deserve a reboot/remake. First up is Lufia: The Legend Returns, released originally in 2001 for the Game Boy Color. This game has a bit of an odd story as far as development goes. The game was supposed to be the third installment of the Lufia series, called Ruin Chaser. It was being developed for the PlayStation 1. The company developing the game at the time, Nihon Flex, went out of business and the project was scrapped. It was later picked up by the developer Neverland. They basically changed everything about the original project to produce Lufia: The Legend Returns. They changed the graphics to be more appropriate for a handheld, the story, almost all of the characters, and pretty much the entire game. Playing this game for the first time as a 12-year-old, I both loved and hated the heck out of this game. Its randomly generated dungeon maps made for a seamlessly endless grind, but was made bearable by the on-screen enemies as opposed to random encounters. The battles themselves had the most basic graphic interface, but the variety of characters and skills allowed for interesting strategies. I think to this day, it's one of the only RPGs where you can have up to 9 people in your active battle party. Lufia: The Legend Returns has a pretty stereotypical JRPG story, but this does not take away from the enjoyable, if sometimes challenging, game experience. What really captured my preteen self into this game was the wide cast of characters and their individual stories. It's because of Lufia's extensive cast of characters that I think this game would really shine on a more modern platform. Giving the game a graphic facelift, but keeping the challenging and strategy-based battle system would make for an excellent handheld game. The original game managed to pack quite a lot into a limited Game Boy Color cartridge. A new, rebooted version wouldn't have to do much besides improve the graphics. Hopefully, a remake of The Legend Returns would not end up like the awful Lufia: Curse of the Sinestrals, a 2010 DS game that was so frustratingly bad it may have killed the whole series.
Do you think you guys can
keep up with our groove?
Lufia: Curse of the Sinestrals was supposed to be a remake of Lufia 2, but its change from traditional RPG turn-based combat to a hot mess action side-scroller left much to be desired. If we see more of the Lufia series in the future, hopefully they'll stick to their RPG roots and not make another disaster. Next, we have Breath of Fire 2. Breath of Fire 2 was originally a game developed for the Super Nintendo in 1994 by Capcom. It was later brought to the States in 1996. The first time I played the game was on the Game Boy Advance port when it was released in 2002. This game really captured my attention with its in-depth story and themes that I hadn't often seen in RPGs before. Like Lufia, this game's strength was with its colorful cast of characters who were engaging enough to make you want to advance in the game. However, localization was not kind for this game, and the resulting translations were sometimes confusing and stopped the flow of the story as you struggled to figure out what you were supposed to do. The interface also struggled a bit in its transition from the Super Nintendo to the Game Boy Advance. This game shined the most with its character designs, character stories, and township side quests. A new, updated version with updated graphics could address the localization issues and introduce a new generation to a classic JRPG-style game. Breath of Fire 2's interesting story, diverse characters, a large world that can encourage discovery and exploration, and use of character power-ups and development keeps this particular RPG one of the best I've ever played on a handheld. I can see this rebooted game competing with modern RPGs just fine. Next, we have the first two Golden Sun games, Golden Sun and Golden Sun: The Lost Age. Both were released for the Game Boy Advance in 2001 and 2002 respectively. Now, I actually hesitate to put this classic series on this list, because in my opinion, these games are pretty solid as they are. A new port of the first game could expand gameplay so it's not as short, but even by today's standards, I think the graphics and gameplay still shine. I would like to see a port of these games to a newer system, but honestly, other than a few tweaks to the graphics, extended dialogue and character building, these games are still great and deserve to be ported so that new players can enjoy these excellent games. Golden Sun really took advantage of its platform, the Game Boy Advance, and had awesome graphics for the time. It's hard to believe that Lufia: The Legend Returns was actually released the same year as the first Golden Sun. The semi-3D battlescape was so revolutionary after games on the Game Boy Color. Both these games would go on to be quite a hit among the gaming community, especially JRPG fans. Unfortunately, like the Lufia series, Golden Sun had a rough 2010. After the long overdue and mostly disappointing third installment, the 2010 Golden Sun Dark Dawn for the DS, I think the best way to keep people's interest in the series is to revamp the original two. Why, Dark Dawn, why? I wanted you to be so good, but you forgot to add plot progression. Next, we have Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. Lunar 2 Eternal Blue is one of my all-time favorite games. The first time I saw it played on the PlayStation, it blew my mind. The integrated anime-style cutscenes, engaging story, and amazing soundtrack changed the way I thought about video games and was my gateway into the wonderful world of JRPGs. Now, this game was originally released for the Sega CD in 1994 and 1995 in the US. It was later ported to the PlayStation, but unlike its predecessor, Lunar: Silver Star Story, the ports stopped there. Lunar: Silver Star Story got an awesome port/remake for the Game Boy Advance named Lunar Legend in 2002. Being a huge Lunar fan, this was the holy grail. I finally got to play a Lunar game on a then modern handheld system. While it's not a direct port, this game was an excellent addition to the Lunar franchise, and I was overly optimistic that my beloved Lunar 2 would soon follow with its own port/remake. So I waited, and I waited, and waited. And instead, I got Lunar: Dragon Song for the DS.
Something's gone terribly wrong.
No, Lunar, no! Then, in 2009, there was yet another remake of Silver Star Story for the PSP. What the heck? Now, I love Silver Star Story, but where's the love for Eternal Blue? I mean, we did get the Lunar 2 Eternal Blue complete version for the PlayStation, but the second story of the Lunar series never got a chance to shine on a new platform like its predecessor. So, developers, to this day I have my fingers crossed that we will someday see this amazing game ported. For now, I guess...
Our love eternal shall be destiny.
Finally, we're going to end with Final Fantasy VI. The game was originally released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo. It was later ported to the PlayStation in 1999, and then eventually to the Game Boy Advance in 2006. Arguably one of the strongest titles in the Final Fantasy series, this game deserves the best remake the industry could offer. If they can give Final Fantasy X a facelift and completely remake Final Fantasy VII, hopefully an updated port/remake of Final Fantasy VI is not out of the realm of possibilities. The Final Fantasy IV port to the 3DS is a perfect example of applying current technology and graphics to an outstanding story, revitalizing the game for a new generation of players. While Final Fantasy VI did get a pretty good port to the Game Boy Advance, Think of how amazing the game would be with the same treatment given to Final Fantasy IV. The Game Boy Advance limited graphic capability meant that the game had to leave out the full motion videos of the PlayStation version. And while the mobile games do provide more platforms to play the original, it would be great to see a full reboot of this game with updated graphics and a remastered soundtrack. 6 had one of the best stories of the series, and along with a powerful soundtrack and excellent gameplay, is still one of the best. Out of all the games I've listed, I have the most hope that Final Fantasy VI is a game we will see successfully redone in the future. These are the JRPGs I'd love to see remade and ported. With a rebooted Radiant Historia on the way, hopefully developers will look into bringing some other great JRPGs back to life utilizing the new technology we have today. This has been Katiescapes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next escape.